All right, I guess we're going to get the show on the road here. I want to thank everybody for showing up. I do appreciate every time we have these, and we have good participation from the public, and that's what we're shooting for, is to get information out to you, give you a chance to ask questions, and get your questions answered. I do want to say that, little intro here, the money for this master plan was voted on by the council last year and approved, and so that's why we're moving forward with this. This plan will give us a playbook so that we can start freshening up and restoring our waterways out here. This is something people have been asking for a long time, and it hasn't happened, but we're moving forward with it now, and we want to get the thing cleaned up so you don't feel bad or you feel like you can't let your dog go in the water. I know that that's what the waters look like at my place, or I wouldn't even let my dog in it. Especially for kids. I got grandkids that want to go out there and swim in it, and we don't allow that in the summertime either. So this is important to all of us. It's important to me too. So that's why we're moving forward on this deal. We are going to do some treating this year and some harvesting, some of both. My hope is that we can somehow make it all harvesting at some point and not do any more of the treating of the water. But that was recommended by Herrera, that we go ahead and do the normal summertime treating and harvesting that will help clean up the waterway. The city hasn't purchased a harvester. I know there's some people that think we did that. I don't know where they got that idea or information, but we have not bought one. We're going to wait for the master plan so that we'll be able to approach the cleanup and restoration of the waterways properly on that. And the Fresh Waterway Committee, they will reconvene when we have a plan. Right now they don't have a whole lot to do, but once we have the plan, they will be intimately involved with how we move forward with the process to cleaning up the waterways. So that's all I have to say about that. I thank you guys for coming today, and Becky, you're up.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming. I just wanted to differentiate between the two vendors that we have working on our fresh waterways currently. Katie and Tim, thank you for coming tonight. They are with Herrera Consultants, who, like the mayor said, are working with us to draft our master plan for the fresh waterways, and council approved Herrera to work with the city last March. At last night's city council meeting, the city council approved Northwest Aquatic Management to do this year's harvesting and aquatic treatment of the waterways. Two different vendors doing two different scopes of work for the city. So I just wanted to make sure that that was also clear, that we've got two different vendors working on the waterways, because it can be confusing, and excited to have both groups working with us this year. And also just keep in mind that the master plan scope of work will be something that continues to move forward and should be finished around next June or July. So that's something that will be an evolving project that we'll be working and having updates and additional town halls moving forward as well.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks for coming out tonight. I'll underscore what Becky had just said. It can be confusing at times when you see two different vendors working on two different things related to our waterways, but they are very different things at the end of the day. Tim Clark is here with Herrera Environmental Consultants, and he's brought Katie I'll let her do that with him. And they're just going to provide an overview of sort of the comprehensive science-based plan to guide our public and private investment, so we can enjoy our waterways both for recreational purposes and have better environmental health on our waterways that the mayor was alluding to earlier. During the course of this presentation, Clark is going to describe sort of the history of our fresh waterways. We'll look at some of the past studies that we've done and efforts to improve general water quality. He's going to describe the scientific study approach to evaluate our current conditions in the fresh waterways and how they will inform that management plan. He'll also introduce the potential management actions on how we're going to improve our water quality. And the plan is focused on surface water quality in ocean shores, Other issues, this has been brought up at different meetings, such as fisheries or aquatic plants, drinking water quality, flooding, will be dealt with in a different way. That's not the scope of what they're here to do. They're here to sort of evaluate us and tell us how to improve the water and the water quality in our waterways, and recommend very specific actions that we can take. So with that, I will turn it over, I believe, to you. Yeah.
Do you mind if I use that mic? Gotta push the button. Hi, could I get the PowerPoint on, please? So I apologize, I have a bit of a haggard look. Katie and I were just out sampling all of the fresh waterways of ocean shores today. So I'm a little red in the face and a little windswept. But it was very lovely. I really appreciated the opportunity to get out on those waterways and to experience them. So with that, I guess I will be speaking to you to say like next slide type of thing, just for coordination. Okay, great. So my name is Clark. I'm with Herrera Environmental Consultants. I am a limnologist, which is the fancy word to say lake scientist. I do work to help support communities, cities, and other groups to manage their lakes. I'm joined with by Katie Sweeney, who is my fellow limnologist at Herrera Environmental Consultants. Can we move to the next slide, please? Okay. So for this meeting, I wanted to provide a brief project overview of what this plan will entail, and then I want to describe the science-based monitoring plan we'll be using to inform the development of the watershed and fresh waterways management plan. A component of this project is the utility rate study, which I'll describe briefly. Then I want to provide a brief overview of the schedule for this project, and then have time for questions, discussion, and to hear from each and all of you, because you are more of the experts of the freshwater ways of ocean shores than I am. You've experienced for a lot longer. I've been out here for a day, and I've read some reports, but that does not compare to your lived experience. So I'm looking forward to hearing that. Next slide, please. So the goal for this project is to develop a comprehensive science-based plan to guide public and private investment for the benefit of human recreation and environmental health in the fresh waterways of ocean shores. Next slide. The objectives of this project: one, we want to develop management goals to identify what is exactly we're trying to achieve. And those management goals are not going to be a one-size-fits-all for all of the fresh waterways of ocean shores. One thing that Katie and I really observed today when we went from Marine View Park through Lake Menard, through the Bell Canal, up and down Grand Canal, through Fish Hook Passage into Duck Lake, is that each and every one of these ocean shores, waterways, canals, and lakes is very unique, and the management strategy and the management goals for each of those may be very different. And so we need to develop a plan that is consideration of what can we do feasibly, and what are we trying to achieve for each of these waterways. And so I really want to be able to elicit that from you all, to understand what is the goal for Lake Menard, what is the goal for Grand Canal, what is the goal for Duck Lake. So that's a key piece of this. I'm looking forward to getting that feedback today, and then also to be getting that feedback through the development of this project. That's a very big objective. Bullet 2, we also want to evaluate the current conditions and causes of the impaired human and ecological uses in the ocean shores freshwaterways, specifically due to water quality concerns. So looking at excess algae blooms. We saw a lot of that in Fish Hook Passage today. Probably one of the worst I've seen in a waterway in the state of Washington. Further, we want to identify actions, which includes projects, policies that will support achieving those management goals. And then as a piece of that, we want to identify measures of success so that we know that we're making progress towards achieving those goals. Next slide, please. So the plan focuses on surface water quality, as Scott summarized. It does not focus on fisheries, aquatic plants, drinking or groundwater quality, or flooding. We will consider co-benefits or potential negative consequences of the management strategies that we are evaluating on those endpoints. Would this management strategy negatively affect fisheries? We'll want to talk about that, and that's going to be something that we will be in conversation with the city and the community in terms of evaluating what is the strategy moving forward for the fresh waterways. Next slide, please. So I would like to start first with getting a better understanding from folks here, and I think we have a really huge turnout, which I'm really excited for. And so we might not be able to hear from everybody, and so I would like to start with understanding, what do you really like about the fresh waters of ocean shores? What are the positive attributes? What brings you joy from these waterways? And so to do this, I would like for folks for 1 minute to think to themselves, reflect personally on what are those positive attributes. It's often quick and easy to start complaining, talking about what happens in Fishhook Passage, but I really want us to start with the positive here. And so for 1 minute, please, to yourself, think about the things you love about the fresh waterways. I'll wait. Katie's got time. Thank you all so much. That was the most silent anyone has ever been when I've made that request. You guys are fantastic. Okay, and so now I want you to share what you were reflecting on with the person next to you. If you came here with that person, or you already have a relationship, turn to a person that you maybe don't talk to as much, so you can hear what their reflections are. So, and that's going to be for 2 minutes. And so that's 1 minute each to share what you just reflected on. Yeah, every time I win. Great. Thank you all. And so at this point, I'm interested, please wrap up those conversations. Thank you. Yeah. So now I would like for, let's see. Yeah, let's go for each row here, because we're in pairs. I want each of those pairs to find another pair, and that might just be everyone in a row, and to share that discussion that you just had, and share your thoughts, and continue to have that discussion. And we'll have about 4 minutes for this.
Have you hung? Both of you were military. That's what we do, though. We see their service gathering.
What do you say? What do you say about posters? About posters? Let's talk about that. Is that tea?
Okay, as you're wrapping up this discussion with the group of 4, I want you to identify one person in your group that will be the representative and share what your group talked about, so that we can hear about it. Okay, I think there's microphones out there, yeah? Oh, you got one. Thank you. All right, let's start just in the front here, whoever was the representative of the group on stage left.
And they have asked for the cameras, if you will please stand up when you're talking. So who is your spokesperson?
And avoid getting volunteer, try to identify someone soon.
You gotta stand up.
Okay, should I look that way? The flora and fauna and the vistas probably are the major thing many of us like, you know, in the lakes and the canals, etc. That is probably, you know, the grabber for us.
Mm-hmm.
You know, be it, you know, the otters, the birds, the swans, everything else that comes through, especially during migration season.
Thank you. Next group, please. Diane, please. Oh,
This is being voluntold right now. So we were starting to talk about other things besides what we were enjoying, but I can share some of the things I like. The critters, all of the critters, the deer, the ducks, the geese, the herons, the otters, and then there's a couple other critters that I'm not sure I like. But anyway, it's in the view, being able to kayak and just go out there. I know this isn't what you want to hear, but we got into talking about some of the tools and things to take care of it. But one of the things I've noticed at my place is some of the critters are not around as much as they were because the water's changing.
Mhm.
So it's true. Anyway, I was voluntold, so I didn't get everybody's story.
Okay. Thank you. And someone's being pointed to.
You guys have time?
Yes.
Okay, first of all, it's in my DNA. That's why I got the property there on the Grand Canal. What I wanted to find out from you is, have you done testing as to what kind of bacteria or microbes are in our waterways? Well, that's very...
Hey, Nani,
Huh?
this is about what you like about the waterways. We'll have questions later.
Well, I want to go in the water, but I can't. I'm nervous. I had 2 ladies go past me swimming in the Grand Canal.
Hey, Nani, what do you like about the waterways?
The
And we'll have
waterways.
your questions like that will be later today.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. We can discuss that.
Okay, I'm going to stand up if I can. Oh, hi there.
Hello.
The thing that we like about the water is the peace and quiet. We're on Bell Canal. And it's so fun to watch the canoers come up, and we go out and wave at them and ask them how they're doing, and they're just having a great time. It's very relaxing. I know many of us are seniors or seasoned, as I say, and we have the time to just relax and take a deep breath, listen to the ocean roaring. But again, it is the animals. We have the blue heron that come by. We have eagles. And we'd like to keep it that way. The animals in the water, the ducks, we have otters. It's just very relaxing here for that. And to have all of the stuff, whatever it is, growing out there, and then it smells after a while. Many of us do not enjoy that part of it. So if we can move on from there and get it back to a clean canal and let the canoe people out. I know that there are many people here that want to get in the water, and it's almost impossible in most of the areas. So keep up the good work for us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Marshall. I live on the Grand Canal. Oh, you got to stand? All right. All right. I live on the Grand Canal. I like going out in my pontoon boat in the water. I think it's kind of fun. You know, it's nice to go out there, especially on the nice days. And stuff. But I think the wildlife probably hits it the most. You know, it's just the otters and seeing them out there and seeing them run up on our dock or something like that. I mean, that's amazing when you see that there. You know, and even the carp. When I'm looking out there and I see a carp jump, you know, I'll go, "What was that?" You know, it's like an alligator or something. You know, I don't know. There was like, and I got my neighbors over here, Val and Barbara, and they love to fish. They're out there every day fishing and just catching them little perch and stuff, you know, and then he throws a whole bucket full back in, you know, and every day, you know, I watch this in action. And sometimes you get them trout, you know. And my grandbaby, she caught this trout. It was about that big out there, you know, I couldn't believe it. Nobody caught it that big, you know, and here I caught it. I know. Anyway, other than that there, I don't know. I really like living here in Ocean Shores, and I really like the waterway. It's like it's part of my life, and I love getting up in the morning, and especially on a sunshiny day, and going out and sitting on the deck and then looking at the sun and just thinking, what a beautiful place I live. You know, I just live in an amazing place, and you know, to me, it's really cool.
Great. Thank you for sharing.
Right.
Hi, I'm Mike, and I live on Lake Menard, and I'm an avid sailor. And so we have a sailboat on Lake Menard. If you are going over South Razor Clam Bridge and you look towards Lake Menard, in the distance you'll see a mast, and that's where we're at. And we specifically came here to Ocean Shores for the water, and we're looking for a place to put our sailboat. And so we enjoy sailing. I live cattywampus from Lisa. In fact, over the 4th of July weekend, we were sailing by her place and making loops and waving at her as we were going by. And so I enjoy getting out there, and I just took my neighbors out. And we had that boat over about 40 degrees. If you sailed at all, you'll see the mast almost, 45 degrees off the water. We were ripping across that little lake. We would have preferred for Duck Lake, but the house we were looking at when we came over to look went under contract, and so we ended up thankfully on Lake Menard. Talking about the wildlife, we like watching the mist come across from the ocean because the lake is big enough to see those things in the winter and during the migratory season. You have the Brant cormorants out there and the buffleheads and the river otters going by. I've had my niece and my daughter and my son-in-law come out and get to see the otters swimming by, which is just fantastic. One of my new neighbors, we were taking her sailing, very nice and relaxed. The mast was like this and not like that. We went right by a carp, and he was about a 4-footer sitting right there. We just went right by him. And then my wife saw one, and then it kafunked my rudder. And I thought maybe it had learned lessons from orcas, was going to take out my rudder. But I think a lot of the folks, seeing the water, being able to be into it with a kayak or stand-up paddleboard, those type of things, we've done that as well.
Right.
3 years ago, we caught 3 trout and a largemouth bass within an hour off of our dock. It was amazing. And so that hasn't happened since, so I don't know if there's anything going on with that. I know that the fish or the animals were a little bit lighter this migratory season. But we love the views, we love the water, that's what drew us here.
Right.
And I think that's what we were kind of talking about.
Great. Thank you.
I am Pamela Isaacson. Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. We were just talking about the view and the canoers, and I like getting up in the morning and have a cup of coffee on the porch, and I've learned early morning to make sure I'm fully dressed because we have early morning fishermen out there. So I'm like, oh, hold on. So, it's fun to see them out there. And but the bulkhead has a lot of green on it. It's the first year ever that I've not been able to see the bottom near the bulkhead. So when the dog tips the ball into the bulkhead, it's like it's staying there. So, well, number one, I can't see it, and 2, I'm not going to put my hand in it. So,
right.
So there you go.
Thank you. Last group.
Connie Clifford. First of all, my dog loves the water, and the water doesn't love her anymore because it's so icky. I think the main reason we bought our house on the Grand Canal was because of the water, and we're in like the largest part of the Grand, and these are all of my neighbors around here. Boating is huge. We have pontoons, and we can spend hours out in those pontoons. I like watching the canoers and the kayakers come around. We like to drink coffee and watch all the birds, but boating is a huge thing, and fishing. Yes, these 2 fish a lot. Anything else? Did I miss something? No? Okay, that's it.
Thank you all so much. It's really great to hear that, and I really feel like today Katie and I got to experience a little bit of that magic that you experience every day. It's a very, very beautiful place. Back to the slides, and I think in the interest of time, can we go back one slide here? We can't go back. Okay. So I had a second question that I wanted to pose to you all, which was around what are the issues or what don't you like about the fresh waterways, and I got some snippets of that, definitely in terms of concerns for your dogs, your pets, or whether or not it's safe to swim in, the smell. I guess just quickly, if there's anything that I'm missing there, I would like to invite someone to step forward. I imagine you talked about it a little bit. I try to get you all to focus on the positive, but I know that negative slips in. That's why we're here. That's why we have a plan. Or developing a plan. So if there's anything that is currently that you don't feel like I captured in that very brief synopsis or concerns, please speak up now because I don't want us to like please. Okay. I don't, can we, Mike? Sorry. And in the interest of time, please aim for like a minute or less.
Sure. Yeah, our first house here, we bought a home on the Grand Canal. We got our dock out there, and I was really pumped up and ready to go. And I was going to teach my dogs to go retrieve their bumpers off the dock and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had a real weed problem. So I just jumped in the water and started clearing out the weeds. And when I come out, my skin would be tingling.
Mm-hmm.
I've never had that before anywhere. So I don't know what's causing that. But then I said, well, I don't want to get in that water because I don't know what's causing that. So I hired people to come out. And the people that came out to clean the area were hip waders.
Mm-hmm.
They would not get in the water. They said, you're crazy to get in the water. So I did that 2 years where they came out in their hip waders to clean. And so something needs to be done about that.
Yeah.
I will not let my dogs go in that water until, hopefully you guys come up with a plan for us.
Great.
Thank you.
My concern is I've been here over 4 years now, and it's a daily routine of mine to walk my dogs down the North End Grand Canal Walk, which goes along the North End Grand Canal where the ditch drains out there. And when we first started walking the dogs, there were cranes and ducks and otters, and it slowly declined to where this year, if you walk along the Grand Canal there is absolutely no crane, no ducks at all. We will see the otters sporadically, but that is a very big concern for me because there used to be a lot of fowl in there, and there's absolutely zero now. So that is one of my greater concerns and what's causing that.
Thank you.
What I would like to see is that you guys do testing, because I really would like to know what's in that water. If it's bacteria or microbes, whatever is in there. And also, we had about 60 boats this weekend out there going back and forth through our area, down to Duck Lake. And I know that when they come through, they create wakes, but then they're also churning the water. Does that have any effect on making the canal or the Grand Canal a little deeper, or besides just trying to cause damage to our, docks? And then, and like everybody else, we used to have a lot of animals come over. I didn't have any otters. I just saw the fowl. But this year, nothing. And I refuse to let my dog go in the water. But I have an RVer lot next door, not me, but my neighbors. And they think it's really nice, and then they both jumped in the water, and I couldn't tell them, no! But they went past me and heading down towards IGA. But, if we could make it nice so that we could do this. Where I came from, we didn't have this issue. We had streptospirosis, the residue that came from the piggies. And on that one, you cannot have cuts. You have to wash off after you get out of the water. But this is, I don't know what's in there. That's what I want to know. What's in there?
Thank you. All right, let's do one more, unless you feel like your concern has not been captured.
So I saw you coming down the Grand Canal in the north end today, so thank you. And I saw you down the ways. I'm guessing you were getting some samples down there.
Yes.
Which is great. So one of the things I noticed at my place, because I've got one of those weed raisers where I throw out and reel in, I've got a weed rake, and I can't keep up with the weeds. They're growing so fast. And another thing that I noticed is when I threw out my floating rake to pull stuff in this last week, some really weird colored green-blue water popped back up.
Yeah.
So that was new, and I saw some kids that are on a camping lot just across the way a little bit swimming last week, and I was horrified.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, thank you for doing all this.
Yeah. Thank you.
Just three quick things. One is, I know that your plan says that you're not addressing aquatic plants, but that is a huge part of the problem. The pennywort, the parrot feather, and the reeds. And my husband and I get out there and do massive manual labor, and we're a little bit younger than some people, and we're sore for weeks afterwards. That has to be addressed. The second thing is the boats, 5 miles per hour or wake speed. And we have a lot of people, I think they're probably going 5 miles per hour, but they're creating massive wake. And when you tell them, they cuss you out because they're going 5 miles per hour. And there doesn't seem to be an understanding that it's not 5 miles per hour you get to do it. It's or wake speed. And that's causing a problem with the waterways. It's causing a problem with people's banks. And then the other is, people have already said, goodness, let's see what we can do to make the quality of that water better with testing. I would love to be able to actually use a sit-on-top kayak, but you get wet in those. There's no way I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm. Right. Just this last one, so we can make sure, and we can continue to have conversations after this in the hallway.
Richard Wilson, I'm one of the trustees in the Fresh Waterways Corporation. I and the other trustees have been working to mitigate the problems in the lake for about 6.5 or 7 years. My primary concerns are the overabundance of aquatic vegetation,
mm-hmm.
the layer of muck on the bottom. I'm hoping that you guys are going to test and determine how deep that layer is. I suspect fishhook is the worst because you've seen the environment there, and the algae, and those are both driven by the weeds and the algae are driven by an overabundance of nutrients. And I hope they're going to help us solve where those overabundance of nutrients are coming from. Thank you.
Right. Thank you. That is a great transition to back to our slides in which we'll be talking that. I do want to respond to each of those concerns and comments. We have noted those, and I will be responding to those later on. I don't think we have time for that today, but know that those aren't falling on deaf ears, and we will be working towards that and incorporating that in terms of how we are developing our management plan and how we will be engaging with you into the future. Can we put the slides back on, please? So for the water quality monitoring, next slide, please. When we're looking at water quality within a lake, we rely on something called trophic state indices, which is a way of looking at the amount of productivity within the water body. And we measure that with 3 ways. One is total phosphorus, which is one of the primary nutrients as a determinant of algae productivity. We look at chlorophyll A, which is a pigment that is used for photosynthesis, and the total mass of that in a sample of water tells us how much algae biomass there is. Then we also use a black and white disc called a Secchi disc in order to measure the transparency of the water. And these 3 measures can be used to determine the lake trophic state. There are 3 trophic states and kind of a 4th for a really extreme. So there's ligotrophic, which is sort of very clear waters than you might see at a mountain lake that has a really low productivity. Mesotrophic, which is moderate productivity, which is true for a lot of lowland Washington lakes. Eutrophic, which is high productivity, high amounts of algae, high likelihood of toxic algae blooms to occur. And then hypereutrophic, which is just an even more extreme case of eutrophic. And so we can look at the concentrations of phosphorus in the water, the amount of chlorophyll, or the transparency to get those measures to estimate. Next slide, please. So dating back to 1976 is when some of the first water quality sampling was done on Duck Lake. And so this was done shortly after the initial dredging and early development of ocean shores in 1976. This overhead image is from 1972. During this time of sampling, there was only 14 homes that were built on the shoreline. It's very different today. But at that time, we already were seeing phosphorus concentrations at 130 parts per billion, which is in that hypereutrophic range. So we, at the start of development, when the fresh waterways were first formed, we already were starting to see that this lake was hypereutrophic. And in the sampling, they say that an algal bloom was observed with a pea soup appearance, which was true today in the southern parts of Duck Lake and in the Fishhook Canal. Next slide, please. One of the more intensive studies for Duck Lake and the fresh waterways was conducted in early 1990s by KCM. This was funded by a straight grant, Centennial Fund grant. Through that study, they determined that Duck Lake was the worst lake in terms of water quality in the state, based off of its high trophic state. And so measuring phosphorus concentrations as low as 100 up to 2,000. And this is the threshold for hypereutrophy is about, I think it's 96. I would have to go back to my table. I don't have that memorized. But we continue to see that in 1994, those conditions had potentially worsened or had stayed the same since that 1976, after a lot of development had occurred. Can we put the slide deck back on, please, and go to the next slide? So that study in 1994 had a host of recommendations for, well, let me start with the findings. The findings were the freshwater waterways are eutrophic to hypereutrophic, that the water quality was the worst in the Bass Canal, that most water and phosphorus and nutrient loading comes into the lake via groundwater as subsurface flows, and that there is abundant amounts of nutrients and algae, and that the algae growth in the lakes and fresh waterways is not limited by nutrients. So if you were to pour more phosphorus into the lake, you wouldn't get more algae, because there's already so much algae that it's limited by light just by itself, that it's clouding itself out so it can't grow anymore, or other micronutrients like iron, was their theory. Next slide, please. So here is a plot of all of the monitoring sites that they had. Starting on the left is North Duck Lake, Mid Duck Lake, South, North Grand Canal, South Grand Canal, the outlet of the lake, Bells, Lake Menard, and Bass Canal. On the left is that trophic state going from 0 to 100, and a solid line going across for that definition of eutrophic. So everything that's above that line is considered eutrophic. And nearly across the board, all parts were considered eutrophic. But we see that there are some that were much higher, such as Bass Canal, Bell, and parts of Grand Canal. Next slide, please. From that study, they identified that shallow groundwater was the major source of phosphorus to the fresh waterways, at about 53% of the total load, followed by Oya Creek, and then Clover Creek, and then that internal loading. So that internal loading is inclusive of what is being released from the sediments within the bottom of a lake or in the canal, and the deterioration and release of nutrients from macrophytes as they die off, as well as waterfowl feces. So those are the four, but groundwater was the significant. And so based off of this information, they made a set of recommendations. Next slide, please. Their number one recommendation was to convert the existing septic systems around the lake to sewer. They thought that the septic systems were contributing high amounts of nutrients to the groundwater table, which was then flowing into the lakes. And so one of the things to help curb that would be to remove those septic systems and convert them to sewer, so that our wastewater is not going into the soils, which then is quickly draining into the lake given the sandy character. Additionally, they made recommendations to construct a wetland at Oyat Creek in order to provide treatment and reduce the phosphorus levels coming in from that creek, as well as establish buffers which allow filtering. They recommend harvesting of macrophytes to remove those nutrients from the lake, and that seems to be moving forward here. And then also to focus on watershed pollution control actions, which is educational campaigns for reduction of fertilizer use for turf fertilizer, and making sure folks clean up after their dogs and prevent that type of fecal runoff. Next slide, please. So one of the things that I think was most impressive coming out of this plan is now Ocean Shores is completely sewered. About 70 septic systems remain, and a lot of those are abandoned. So from this, one of the questions that we have is, have we seen improvements in water quality? There has been sparse water quality monitoring since 1994, but Ocean Shores has made investments in water quality, and we wanted to understand, have those investments resulted in improvements in the water quality of the fresh waterways? Next slide, please. So that is our goal for the water quality monitoring, what we were doing out there today. We want to understand what are the current conditions in the fresh waterways, and have conditions improved or worsened since 1994. Next slide, please. I don't have my slides memorized, so I'm sorry. I think the next slide is about objectives. Are we able to pull that up? Yeah. So to do this, we want to revisit those 1994 monitoring sites that were visited by KCM. So that's evaluating water quality at 8 lake stations. We're doing this 3 times today, September, and in October, or actually November. And then looking at the 3 creeks, Oyat Creek, the inlet to Duck Lake, and Clover Creek. And we'll also be doing additional locations during wet weather to identify potential areas where runoff or stormwater is contributing higher levels of phosphorus to the water bodies. We'll also be looking at fecal bacteria at this time. Next slide. So here's a map of those monitoring sites. I don't think this is too small for us to really enjoy right now, but this is a side-by-side of the KCM sites and our sites, and showing that they match up. Next slide, please. So what is all this monitoring going to tell us? Have the investments in sewers and watershed improvements improved water quality in the fresh waterways? Where are the remaining sources of nutrients to the lake? And where should we put further investments? Next slide, please. As a part of this, we would like to conduct lake level monitoring, and we are looking to recruit some volunteers to do weekly or even daily recording. We want to put a lake level gauge at Chinook Park at the dock, and at the south end of Grand Canal at the South End Park dock. And we'll be working with Becky and Ocean Shore staff to put that installed, but would really appreciate if someone could help us with that, because we'll only be coming out 5 times in order to do monitoring, but we really want to have an understanding of how water flows and leaves the system here. Next slide, please. And so all this information is going to be used to inform a lake and watershed management plan. Next slide. The plan will identify near and long-term actions to manage water quality in line with identified goals and objectives. And I think I've heard a lot from you today that it can help me start drafting up what are the goals, management goals and objectives for the fresh waterways. I'm hearing a lot of interest around algae management, as well as identifying ways to co-benefit wildlife, especially birds, the herons, and fisheries. So those seems to be very high priority, and so we'll be reviewing our notes in order to develop some draft management goals and working with the city and you all to refine them. Next slide. So some of the management strategies we'll be looking at, I'm going to go through this really quickly because we're going to be running out of time. We'll be looking at stormwater treatment options, so such as putting in stormwater ponds, bioretention facilities, things that are able to filter out pollutants that are coming from stormwater so they are not either entering our groundwater or entering the lake. We'll also be looking at sewer inspections. The sewers that have been built are built pretty recently, but that doesn't mean they can't fail. Root intrusions do occur. And so identifying potential strategies to make sure that our sewer pipes are not failing and causing undue pollution to our groundwater and therefore the lakes. Also be looking to evaluate whether or not the conversion of those remaining septic systems, on-site septic systems, abbreviated here as OSS, is necessary. We'll be looking at what is the likely contribution of those septic systems to the overall phosphorus load to the lake, and evaluating sort of the cost benefit of that investment. We will also evaluate pollution reduction actions such as pet waste and fertilizers, activities that individuals can take in order to reduce the load. Next slide, please. We also will be looking at a host of in-lake management strategies. This includes looking at phosphorus inactivation treatments using buffered alum or lanthanum. This strips phosphorus that's available for algae to grow from the water column, creates a very stable bond with aluminum, and locks it into the sediments. There is some concern with toxicity if those are done improperly and can have impacts to fish. If done properly, there are minimal impacts. That's something that I think we really want to consider, that there is some probability or some possibility, however remote, of some undue impacts on wildlife. And so that's something we will really want to consider as we are evaluating these different options. Other options are fish removal by manipulations, trying to change the dynamics of the food web. This is really challenging to do. There's a lot of uncertainty when it comes to playing God within a lake system, especially when it comes to adding fish or removing fish. But we'll be looking at that and trying to work with the Department of Fish and Wildlife to identify what are the current populations. There have been some surveys. And so based off for this and based off what I'm hearing in terms of the importance and value of wildlife to the people here, I really want to be working closely with the Department of Fish and Wildlife as part of the development of this plan. We'll also be looking at lake circulation technologies and enhanced flushing, which actually could be pumping in water from either the deep water wells or from Gray's Harbor and actually using salt water to help flush the water from the lake and enhance movement of water through the system. That's going to, if we were to be using salt water, that is a pretty intense change in the dynamics of the system. And so we are evaluating the feasibility of these actions, not necessarily making recommendations, but we want to go through and think critically around the different options that can exist that can benefit the water quality. So there's going to be pros and cons to each of these, and we will be outlining them. Next slide, please. Additional in-lake strategies, dilution, flushing, just trying to put more water in the system to dilute the amount of phosphorus that's available. Oxygenating the system, this helps keep some of that phosphorus in the sediments. If out there today, we would have really high concentrations of oxygen at the surface, largely due to the high productivity of algae, because they're photosynthesizing, they're converting carbon dioxide into oxygen, and then right below that, there would be very low oxygen, because you have all this decay that's happening beneath it. And so because of that low oxygen, we're seeing higher levels of phosphorus that may be getting released from the sediments, or what's coming in through groundwater is not being able to get locked into more stable iron bonds. We'll be looking into dredging, algicide treatments, which are a short-term solution, but can be really helpful, especially in dire cases. And then other more experimental approaches, such as using microbes and enzymes, barley straw dye, which is a shading agent to help to make light be a more limiting factor, and nano bubblers. Next slide, please. So the plan is going to have, these are the components of the plan. We're going to have a history of the fresh waterways, what are the current management actions that are already underway, a summary of our findings from this monitoring study, the identified goals, objectives, and success measures. What are we trying to achieve, and how do we know we're making progress towards it, as well as that set of recommended management actions, which is going to be co-created based off of our initial feasibility analysis and pro-cons list, and working with the City of Ocean Shores and this community in order to define what is this pathway we want to move forward with, as well as identifying what is the adaptive management framework. How do we make adjustments if we're not meeting those targets that we identified? I think the next slide is talking about the schedule. So the schedule is today, we had this meeting and we went sampling. The next check-in will be in early 2025, in which we want to share the results of this monitoring that we're doing. We're doing monitoring from this month, July, through January of 2025. So probably in February or March, we'll want to meet and share those results, as well as the initial feasibility assessment and pro-cons list of those different management actions, and have that discussion and help to give us the information that we need to move forward with making those recommendations. And another piece of this is a utility rate study. Thank you, slide. Next slide. In which we will be looking to understand, in order to implement this plan and its recommendations, that's going to cost money. And so where is that revenue going to come from? And if we were to be pulling that as a utility rate fee on a property basis, what are different strategies to accomplish that? So those rates may vary based off of the amount of imperviousness, like the amount of hard surfaces on a property. It can vary based off access to the lake. It can also vary based off income. It can also vary on each of those factors and additional factors. And we'll be working with a set of experts to help develop those different options. And this is not making a decision in terms of what those property rates would be, but evaluating what are the different options for setting this up. We also will be looking at external funding sources such as state grants and identifying those, and that could be used to lower that burden of on property taxes or utility rates. Next slide, please. And next slide again. Okay, so develop the monitoring plan. We have done that. We delivered that recently to city staff who are reviewing it, and we're implementing it starting today and moving through the January 2025. In early 2025, we're going to have that meeting to discuss our monitoring results, our draft management goals, and outline those potential management actions, as well as discuss what is the framework of that utility rate. And then by May of 2025, using that feedback and information that we gather at that public meeting, we'll deliver a draft plan for the city to review. And then in May or June of next year, we will present that plan and then finalize it in June of next year. Next slide. And it's questions, and we're at 7 o'clock. And so I am available for the next 15 minutes. We have a few more sites that we need to go sample today, and then we have a long drive back to Portland, to our Portland office. So I would love to talk to you all, but I will need to jet out of here in about 15 minutes. And so we can have the discussion here or in the hallway. I'm not sure if there's another need for this room, but just in closing, I want to thank you so much for your time and that information that you shared and your stories of the fresh waterways. This is a very special place, and Katie and I are both very committed to developing a plan that is going to be feasible and implementable to protect and enhance the fresh waterways. All right, thank you. Please.
I just have, and I'm totally a layman here, so if I'm saying something, I just have two questions. One is, one is, does it help at all for the owners to try and pull the reeds out around, like our docks and stuff like that? Will that do anything to help improve, or?
So we'll look into this a little more, and based off of my observations today as I moved through the canals, I was impressed by the amount of aquatic vegetation along the shoreline, but I was also very impressed by the limited erosion that I saw. So those plants are helping to prevent that wake from tearing around at the shoreline. So those are helpful. Certainly those plants that are emergent and further out, such as they're invasive plants like curly leaf pondweed and milfoil, those are much more problematic and can clog those canals. Near the shoreline, those plants are really protective and are important habitat for fish and insects, and which the birds rely on. Every time we went under a bridge today, swallows erupted with us, and they really rely on those bugs that are living and like have that habitat in that near shore area. So we'll look into that further, but having a vegetated shoreline is really important, both for preserving your property, but also enhancing the habitat.
Okay. And then I had a second question, and it may not, I don't even know how it relates, and Frank or Scott, one of you might be able to answer that too. We have a lot of culverts that are open, and many of us are trying very hard to get those culverts covered up, because a lot of them in the summertime, they look like they're full of rust. They are literally disgusting. Swarms and swarms of mosquitoes around them. And you kept talking about groundwater. So I'm wondering if that has any way then of slipping into that and creating any more problems. So, and it may not. I'm just asking the question.
Thank you. We'll have to look into that a little further. I would not expect that to have any specific water quality impacts in terms of groundwater. The reason why those are so wet, you have a very shallow groundwater table here. And so those drains and then so those open culverts, those are just Clover Creek and Pacific Train, those are going to stay damp, especially in those like sort of more deeper divots that have been created. So that can make habitat for those insects. I imagine that that's kind of beyond the scope of this work, but that is something that we want to consider in terms of co-benefits. And when we're identifying stormwater management actions that can have upstream, putting in bioretention, that's something we'll really want to consider is how can we take advantage of our high groundwater table and some of these, the fact that it's all serviced. Some of the greater challenges in urban areas is the fact that all the stormwater pipes, all the ways that we deal with runoff is put into pipes and it's buried underground. So if you want to do any fixes, it's really expensive to tear up the asphalt. So there is a great opportunity here to do more natural-based solutions for stormwater management at a lower price because of that retrofit cost is going to be lower. So that's something we'll be looking into as part of the stormwater watershed management actions strategies. We won't necessarily be as specific as saying we should put something right here, but we can identify what it would look like to look to evaluate and to develop a prioritization list.
So,
Thank you.
something that has not been brought up is that the fact that, once again, I'll bring up because I'm so familiar with the area, is the North End Grand Canal that's between the 11th and 12th hole of the golf courses.
Mhm.
The golf course uses fertilizer on it. It's right on each side of the canal.
Right.
And nobody's addressed that. And of course, the golf course is a big part of our community, but it's something that I haven't heard anybody mention. And as you said, with our high groundwater, surface water,
Mhm.
what are we using on there, and how is that affecting the canals also?
Yeah, and I think that's something we will want to look into, and we'll work with the management at the golf course and identify what are the current fertilizer uses and application rates, and identify potential alternatives for that. But also we'll be looking to see, between the golf course and other sources of phosphorus and nutrients, what is manageable and what can we control and what will be influential to the water quality of ocean shores. We can make investments that are very expensive, but they may not actually result in benefits to water quality, and then we can make investments that are much cheaper. It may be more beneficial, and it's really going to depend on, I'm not saying that the golf course would be too expensive to manage or anything like that. I'm just sort of speaking in terms of how we'll be looking at all these different options. We'll want to look to see what is the most cost-effective solutions and what will help us achieve those management goals, which may differ with each of the different waterways.
Quick question. The Oyhut ditch coming into here, are you going to do any testing on that to see what quality of water is coming into the city?
Yes, we will be collecting samples at the mouth of Oyhut Creek as well as further upstream at the city line.
Okay, because as you go out by the casino out there, you can see the same things growing in their water out there as what we have growing in ours.
Mm-hmm.
Just a comment.
Thank you.
It's easier to sit than try to struggle getting up.
Yeah.
How far north did you go on Duck Lake, as into the near Rain Street, where the two culverts supply us water to Duck Lake? One, and two, I know that the Port of Grace Harbor uses cattails to control organics going into their water systems, et cetera, because cattail is a natural solution for organic phosphates and oils and all the rest of that stuff.
Yeah, so for Duck Lake, we went to a sampling station. Oh, I don't know streets here. We went under several bridges, and we went as far north into the northern basin of Duck Lake that we could. Between Rain and Chance. So we went under the Chance Lamar Bridge and to that northern basin, and we will be sampling that inlet to Duck Lake on the northern end as well. And as part of our management actions for runoff management, we'll be looking at bioretention and other natural-based solutions for treating stormwater, such as the cattails. And so using plants that grow well and use up the nutrients are really great for those situations. So those wetland type treatment facilities are something that we have a lot of interest in. And I'm not an engineer, but we have a whole host of engineers at Herrera who love to build those things. Oh, sorry. Next.
Yeah, real quick, piggybacking on what Jane said about the fertilizers.
Mm-hmm.
Fertilizers and chemical use is a real problem in the waters. And a lot of the chemical we use to kill the weeds goes down and stays in the muck, from what I'm told.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure what kind of problems that's creating. But the fertilizer, I have a neighbor, and go in her house, and it's like walking into a tropical garden. I've never seen anybody with so many plants that are so big and so green. It's seriously like a tropical garden inside her house. And I went in there, how do you do this? What do you use? She goes, oh, it's real simple. I just take a bucket and go take water out of the canal, and I use that to water all my plants with. And she goes, there's so much fertilizer in there, I don't have to buy fertilizer. And that's what she does. And I see her every other day taking water out of the canal to go water her plants. And they're absolutely gorgeous. But it's not saying a lot for our water condition out there. And I'm hoping you guys come up with a fix for that.
Thank you. Coming around.
Just quickly, an anecdotal story. Lake Menard is kind of small, and so boats will come in, they'll make like a loop and like, hey, there's nothing here, and leave.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate because we like to see a lot more boat activity. Y'all with boats, come on over to Lake Menard. Because what I do see anecdotally is that they will churn the water up, and then the reeds and the vegetation on shore will then collect a lot of the moss, and all of a sudden you can see through the water again. And it tends to clear it up. So there wasn't as many boats this 4th of July, so we didn't get that kind of cleaning action that we normally get. But anecdotally, we kind of see that. Thank you.
One of your slides showed the Molaire nanobubble generator. Years ago, nanobubbles, I did a lot of research, Google research, so my Google doctorate is just worth what you think it is. But anyway, on that nanobubble generator research, there was all kinds of information about how effective nanobubbles were for remediating this kind of problem. I saw it on your slide. What is your experience with nanobubbles, and could they be a reasonable solution for part of our problem in this waterways?
So I have a very limited experience with nanobubblers. I've done similar research looking into published studies and journal articles looking at the effectiveness of those, and have seen fairly mixed to negligible outcomes. I think that there is, I think they offer a potential solution, but I think based off of other variables that exist, they can get overpowered in terms of breaking up algae blooms. I think that as an experimental solution and maybe working with the manufacturer for a small term lease may be a management action to look into. I don't want to oversell something that I'm not fully sure of, and I would like to see more in-lake installations of them and actually have those undergo rigorous study. So working with the manufacturer to actually develop that study and hopefully get a discount, I think that would be something I'd be really interested in looking into. That's something similar for solar bees, which I've seen as a circulation. Those are some of the things that I see as more experimental. Like in theory, they should work in terms of trying to combat the competitive advantages that some algae have, specifically the blue-green algae or cyanobacteria that are producing the toxins. So I'm interested in evaluating those in theory management actions, but I really want to see them in practice. So working with the manufacturer to get a discount and to get a study published around it that shows that they work or shows that they don't work, I think would be a great pathway forward, and that would be something that we will outline in our management plan. We want to present actions that we think will work, but also we want to present some possibilities of, here's something that we could try that it'll be cheaper, but we're less sure of, but maybe we can find a way to make it even cheaper and have it be more beneficial.
Years ago, when you Googled nanobubble, it was prolific. Now there's almost nothing. So my conclusion seems to parallel yours, that maybe nanobubbles does not live up to the 5-year-ago hype.
All right, thanks. One last question, because these two still have a lot of work to do, and
drive, and I
daylight's
appreciate that.
burning.
One
Yeah.
quick comment and then my question. I really appreciate the fact that you brought up that the different areas have different needs. I don't know if that's been addressed before, so I really appreciate that because I really believe that's true. And my question is, I guess I'm a little confused, and I apologize if I'm asking a dumb question, but you have the other vendor that is going to go ahead and do the harvesting with the chemical, correct? While you're doing the ongoing testing and things, correct? Okay, so something is happening this year? Yeah. Wonderful, okay. I was worried, I thought, oh, these guys are going to take, and it's going to be a long time before we see any solutions. So something's happening in the meantime. Wonderful, okay, thank you.
All right, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. These two have to get out of here and get back to work. I hope you enjoyed the information that was shared tonight.
Thank you all so much.